This is an exclusive excerpt from the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Recently, we lost a mentalist and entertainer simply known as the Amazing Kreskin. This was a man who captivated generations of TV audiences. He was a fixture on our TVs, particularly with his show that originated from Canada in the 1970s called The Amazing World of Kreskin. Born George Joseph Kresge Jr., he died December the 10th at his home in Caldwell, New Jersey at the age of 89. I had the pleasure of talking to him 20 years ago on my old radio show, and he was a most delightful guest and an engaging storyteller. Here is just a bit of a much longer conversation that we had.
I have to tell you, a few months ago, I was performing. One of the shows I did was for a corporate affair, and it was in Montreal. And part of all my performances, Peter, is at a certain point in the program, I turn my check over to the audience. I mean, literally. And then a committee escorts me from the theater. In this case, it was one of the old hotels in downtown Montreal. I can't think of the name, but anyway, we went out of the banquet hall into I think it was the kitchen area, and a committee escorted me. And while I'm out, the group that was handing my check. In this case, it was 3 gentlemen, I believe 2 gals. They were to hide my check anywhere in the entire banquet hall. It was not a very large room. I guess maybe it was about 400 people or so forth. And if you think of a theater, this could be done in a theater with a few thousand. State fairs are like in the thousands. But anyway, my fee is hidden. Now, Peter, if you can picture the scenario, I walk back into the room, and you can hear a pin drop at this moment, because my agreement is simply this. I don't ask any questions. Nobody talks to me about it, gives me any hints. They just have to focus mentally on what they've done. And if I don't find my fee, I don't get paid. Now, Peter, is that an interesting way to make a living? Can you imagine putting a good darn hard week's work at the station, and then at the end the VIP saying, well, Peter, you did a wonderful job, and we're going to hide your check, and if you don't find it, you'll get paid. Crazy.
I'm assuming that your mortgage is already taken care of.
Well, we will talk about that. So anyway, I walked back in. The reason I remember this so vividly is I'm concentrating, and the committee is kind of following me. Nobody's talking to me, and I was so preoccupied. I bumped into a gal, knocked over the coffee that was on her table, and which, sadly enough, poured into our lap a little bit. Of course, someone, needless to say, shouted out and said, Kreskin, how come you didn't foresee that was going to happen? But anyway, I ended up in the back of the banquet hall in the hotel, and they had, these large metal canisters that have, I guess, the hot coffee in before they're poured into, I guess, other containers or what have you. And I kept lifting, I remember the third container of the floor, and kept lifting it, and there was nothing under the container, but I made a dish or what have you, and I thought, what the heck is this all about? And I turned to the committee. I said, you folks know where it is? And they looked at me. Of course we do. So help me God. I got to turn the lid over, get me a large glass bowl, and a waitress did, and I emptied the entire hot coffee into the bowl, and there was apparently no check, and the committee looked slightly chagrined. They said, yeah, Kreskin, you found the check, but it disintegrated in the coffee. Swear to God, that's what happened. But I have failed 9 times through the years. And people will say out of 6,000, that's not a lot of times. But once in New Zealand, where I failed the first year, I was there one night at a theater, and I lost $51,000 in one night. So it can get expensive.
Ouch. Mr. Kreskin, sir, I grew up watching your television show in the 70s that you had. Yeah, that was on CTV, as a matter of fact, here in Canada.
Peter, it was on, as a matter, and just to say Kreskin, I always say call me Mr. after I passed away, but that's not going to be for a long time. Don't worry about it.
I grew up assuming that your first name was Amazing.
It's funny. And by the way, when I'm next time in Montreal, if I'm in for a couple of days and your show's live, maybe I can drop by and come on the air live with you.
Absolutely. More than welcome.
And by the way, listeners, would that not be interesting, my reading Peter's thoughts on the air? We will hold off on that. I got to tell you, it's interesting you bring that up, because Canada has always been my second home, and the show was on 5.5 years, and for the first 2 years, which I often talk about, was the second highest rated program in the nation, and second only to hockey. And my God, there's nothing first over hockey, I would think. But I have to tell you, we had an agreement, and this is a kind of an inside story that I rarely have talked about. The second year of the series, I have a meeting with the VIPs at the network, because now the show is being seen all over the world. And in fact, it was an uncanny feeling being in Japan and suddenly seeing my mouth open and hear hieroglyphics come out, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what do they really have me saying there? So anyway, they're talking to me. They had 6 attorneys, and I don't think Peter, anything could be more. The only thing worse than 6 attorneys is 1 terrorist. That's all I can tell you. So I walk in the meeting, and they said, Kreskin, you don't have rehearsals, and you do these dramatic things, some thought-reading experiments, and sometimes you have difficulty. I say, I can't really work with everybody. I have to concentrate. They said, well, there's a little bit of a discussion. If something fails on a program, would you agree to do it over again, to tape it over? I says, oh, no. I says, no. The show's got to be live on tape. You can edit it because of time, but things fail, and an argument ensued. And God, I guess I was arrogant. And I walked out, and I thought, I can't jeopardize what I do. And I get a call from my manager who lived in Pennsylvania and says, just be quiet about it. The head of the network says they don't want to touch the show. So we always left things, otherwise it could seem like a magic act because things could be rigged. But so I got to tell you, now it comes to the 4th year, and it's the last show of the 4th year. And of course, these were half-hour programs. And some of the listeners will remember I was in the highest structure in Canada, the CNN Tower, CTV Tower.
The CN Tower.
CN Tower,
right.
And which has a rotating
restaurant. Yep.
By the way, they had to shut down the movement of it. As slight as it was, I was getting dizzy, which is a bad sign of what I'm made of. So anyway, my idea of the show was to have. I said to the and they never questioned what I would do because they said, we'll go through it. I said, I want you to get a helicopter, get it outside the window, and have some guests in the with the pilot with a microphone, and I'm going to try to read the person's thoughts. Maybe they'll hold a playing card, maybe they'll look at a picture in a book, and we'll do a few things. Well, Peter, we're taping, and don't you know, the helicopter is now coming towards the window, and suddenly it drops. I just dropped, and I thought, Jesus, what's going on? And we see it finally, a minute later coming back into view, and I'm saying, now concentrate, and suddenly it drops. Well, every single solitary test I did on the show, everything, Peter, failed. This is the last show of the season. We didn't realize, nobody thought about the fact you get near a building with a helicopter, you've got downdrafts, and this poor thing was dropping 20 stories, and I'm thinking, oh my God. And of course, everything's failed. Now I'm going off the air, and it's the last show of the season. I'm saying to the viewers, listen, folks, this is the last show of the season. The sun is going down outside, which may be where my career is going. This may be the sunset. Now I have to tell you, and it's a lesson to people in broadcasting today where everything is taped, and I warn people when I'm on talk shows, I'm touring Canada that summer, and people are coming up to me and saying, Kreskin, we saw that show where the helicopter, and I said, oh my God, here it comes with all the failures on. And I said, yeah, you did. And they said, that was fascinating. That was kind of dramatic, wasn't it? People forgot about the failures. It was the live spontaneity. You know what I mean, Peter?
Right, absolutely.
And that's what's meant. That's why, you're on live radio. As you and your listeners know, there's no turning back. And the only thing left in broadcasting today that's live is a hockey game, maybe the war if it's not rehearsed, and the news.
Absolutely. How did that show come about? How did you end up in Canada?
Well, what happened is, in fact, I just talked about it 2 days ago because here in the United States, an anniversary took place, the 50th anniversary of the Tonight Show, which of course is late night, and
right.
was done with Carson. Before that,
Jack Parr, Steve Allen.
Right, and then Steve Allen. And we were talking, and there's an evolution here because I had done I had not done the Jack Parr show, but I was on I was on Johnny Carson's 88 times, which is kind of a record. God, I just did my 108th show with Regis, so it's kind of known in all my life. So anyway, and the folks in Canada kept seeing me, and I've come into Canada. So anyway, they came to me and they said, you want to do a show? And they got a producer that worked for Johnny Carson who had left the show to work on it, and he had crazy ideas, and I didn't feel comfortable, so we did a pilot. And the pilot that was not, no one liked it, including myself, and the head of CTV came to me and said, Kreskin, why don't you do the show the way you want to do it? I said, I got to do it honestly, my own pace. And believe it or not, it suddenly became successful and went on for 5.5 years. But I got to tell you a little story. Early in my career, when Steve Allen left the Tonight Show, he developed a show in Los Angeles called the Steve Allen Show. College students loved it because he did the craziest things, and it was a 1-hour show. And he heard about me, and in those days, I had just started out, and the word amazing didn't exist. Johnny Carson gave me that. So he flies me out to L.A., and You got to picture the scenario because this is in the mid-'60s. This is early in my career. And Steve Allen says, everybody's interested in ESP, and they said some very nice things. He says, this gentleman has some kind of a gift, all this jazz, a gift or what have you. And he said, let's welcome Kreskin. And I have to tell you, Peter, I walk through the curtain. The lights are blinding in those days. Television lights were hot. And I walked towards Steve Allen, who was about 6 feet, 2 or 3. And you know, all the hosts who have shows have this dais. You know, their desk is slightly elevated. Well, I didn't look, Peter. I went over to shake hands with Steve Allen, tripped over the desk, fell flat on my face on national television. That's my first break. Now, someone happened to be watching that show in L.A. by the name of Johnny Carson, and 6 or 8 weeks later, he created a character called Karnak, the guy with the turban who would walk out and fall over the desk. Remember him?
Karnak the Magnificent.
That's me. Never let me forget that. So the last show, the last year Johnny was on, and you know, obviously it's been an awful lot of time through the years with him. I said, oh, damn it, Johnny, you never let me forget my first break. He says, oh, the mighty Karnak. So, but you know, it's been a great voyage. But I know you have other guests, but one quick thing I want to mention. We were talking about CTV. It's right now, of course, we're going through an election here, in a magazine called Forbes has in their possession a package given them before the Democratic convention a month ago. It was given on a national radio station here in the States, and Forbes is the financial magazine. They have what I think is not just about the election, which is going to be in November, but some of the things taking place in these months here in the States. And it all came about because I would have never dreamt last May that the CTV network, my old home network, comes and calls me, and you had an election, you know, an election at the end of June.
Right.
And Mike Duffy was doing a nighttime show called Countdown, and they said, would I come on? I said, heck, I don't know anything about politics. I haven't studied them that much. And I said, would you send me information? So I've never talked about this. For 2 days, I read every single article I could find. I spent over 20 hours articles in some of the smallest towns in Canada, some of the largest cities, different political opinions and what have you. And I came on the show May 25th and gave them, in fact, they put a package in a safe that they called the Kreskin safe because the show was on live every night. And it was my feeling about the election. Well, to wrap it up, and I didn't get back to Canada until the day after the election. I guess it was around June 29th of the night of the election. So they kept commenting on it. And then, if you remember, for 3 weeks before the election, it was like 33 1/3 polls were for Martin and the Liberal,
right.
33 1/3 for the Conservatives, and 33 1/3 for the Democrats. None of the papers would take a position because it was really
close.
Yeah. As it turned out, Martin won. He didn't have the greatest amount of
right. It's a minority government.
35 seats. My prediction was that I felt that in spite of the polls and what have you, that Martin, the Liberals, would win with 135 seats. So, you know, as some of the columnists have, I get columns every once in a while have pointed out, the one thing maybe what I did showed was, and you will probably understand this more than any of us, Peter, you can't always trust the polls.
No, absolutely not.
What people say in a poll is not the way they're going to feel when they're by themselves behind a curtain. You know what I mean, Peter?
Absolutely.
Listen, I know you got to get going.
We're out of time. It's been a pleasure having a chance to talk to you. Will you come on the program with us again?
I give you my word. When I'm and I will come on soon again, but when I'm in the area, I'll come on. Listeners, I'll read Peter's thoughts. That's going to be an experience.
It's an honor to have a chance to talk to you, and thank you for being on the program.
Take care, Peter.
You too.
I'll see you soon again, be the good Lord willing.
That was part of a conversation with the amazing Kreskin from September 29th, 2004. He passed away at the age of 89 at his home in Caldwell, New Jersey on December the 10th. Kreskin once said that he wouldn't retire until 10 days after he died, and he always ended his shows with, "This is not goodbye, but to be continued."
You've just heard an exclusive excerpt from the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. To hear any or all of the full hour-long shows, visit thestufffile.com. Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's thestufffile.com. A presentation of Flying Fish Communications.